big hello and a very warm welcome to a special episode of Brand Equity with me, Sonali Krishna. Now, last weekend was a rather hectic one for Prime Minister Modi, the Silicon Valley, and for us tracking all of that here at home. Narendra Modi, in his usual flamboyant style, delivered eclectic speeches, an unforgettable Facebook town hall, and a Madison Square repeat at the Sub Center in San Jose. Silicon Valley, needless to say, gushed and marveled at this phenomenon called Narendra Modi. Much was said and a lot promised. Undoubtedly, Narendra Modi took Silicon Valley by storm. But the larger question I am looking to address today, back at home, is India impressed? And to discuss, debate and deliberate just that, I'm joined by a very high-profile panel comprising a heady mix of digital experts, VCs and startups. Joining me in our Mumbai studio is Mahesh Murthy, co-founder of Seedfund, India's leading early-stage venture capital fund and founder of Pinstorm. Venkatesh Hariharan, open source evangelist. Rehan, a venture capitalist and an investor in Ola Cabs. I also have Rajesh Sawhney, a well-known venture capitalist and the founder of Innerchef, joining me from Delhi. First off, thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Truly a pleasure having you on Brand Equity.
Thank you.
Now, all of you here, I'm sure, tuned in all weekend to hear what our head of state had to say to the tech titans, our startup evangelists, during this epic Valley visit. For the record, just before I kickstart this debate, Google plans to enable Wi-Fi in 500 railway stations. Microsoft wants to make available low-cost broadband in 5 lakh villages. And chip manufacturer Qualcomm is launching a $150 million startup fund in India. And with that, Mahesh, let me kickstart this discussion with you. Are you impressed?
So there are some things that impress me and some things that don't. One, he went there, obviously for personal publicity and also for the country's publicity. We ended up looking good. That's a big yes. He went there to try to get money and try to get support. Yes. But there are two things that don't impress me. One, what did we have to give up to get that money and that support? I'm very concerned about the entire Facebook free basics internet.org violation of net neutrality, which looks like it was banned in India by TRAI due to signatures from 1 million of us and a lot of efforts. It looks like that is coming back from the dead again to haunt us, and I'm concerned about that. And second, I'm also concerned about what really happens in India. We can go out and say these things out there, to the rest of the world. But when you come to India, actually there's a big difference between the cup and the lip. You come here and you still have the income tax department raiding venture capital funds and their investing companies saying, I don't consider that an investment, I consider that income, pay 30% tax. You come here, you find people trying to charge you service tax. You still find that angel investors from the US can't put money directly into India via Mauritius because somebody else comes up in the middle. You still find there are old tax, that the income tax department has a target it's trying to meet and it's going after the same, after you, which it has never done before. So there's a huge difference between what's being said outside and the actual ease of business that's happening inside. I do hope that some of this words and verbiage and propaganda that's out there actually is taken to heart in India. And these speeches should be given to our Babudam in India so it becomes easier for us to actually govern and actually invest and actually run our companies.
Rajesh, if I could bring you in, you heard what Mahesh had to say. Are you on the same page as him or do you have a contrarian view? Are you impressed with this rather epic visit?
Definitely. I think he's done a marvelous job of representing us, representing the country, selling the dream. And what I'm really impressed is that he's not just able to connect with the political leaders, but also create a personal rapport with business leaders, which is impressive. But I think when you come back home, you cannot build a digital India without addressing two issues. One issue is the broadband deficit. And while the word is on 5G or trialing 5G or on 4G, we're still a generation behind. Broadband is still not pervasive. Broadband is still not cheap in India. And I think that's the fundamental job that he has to address, or his team has to address. And that brings me to the second point, what I call execution deficit. It's been over a year now that the government has come into power. There's a lot of hope riding on this government. But of what we've seen in last 1 year, there is execution challenges, some of which Mahesh referred to. I think he will pay attention to this, and his team should now gear up to deliver on the promises that he's made.
Right. So, you've heard both of them. Venkatesh, Just tell me, are you impressed? Do you think the Silicon Valley visit is going to translate into giant strides for us here back at home?
I would agree with Rajesh that, there is a huge execution deficit. So I think, for example, there are issues like, how do you encourage Indian language computing? For example, another issue is that the government has said we will encourage open source. But the left arm and the right arm don't seem to know what each other are doing. So they said we'll encourage open source, but at the same time, the government is saying we will bring in software patents. So I think there are issues where, the execution deficit really needs to, I think he's a brilliant leader, but I think his rest of his team really needs to step up the game and, come up to par with, his vision for IT. And that I don't see that happening yet.
Okay, let me take this a little bit forward. Rehan, do you think this trip was critical for India, to make the next big leap when one talks of either digital India or, startups, so to speak?
I think you need to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So what's happening is that on one side these guys are trying to fix, all the policy over here and get things going, but you can't do that without bringing in capital from overseas. And if you look at Modi's touring, it's largely been around that. And I think Rajesh made a great point that this is one leader which is trying to connect with the business community to get that capital moving to India, which is very important. So think of us like a startup, right? India is a bit of a startup country. We're trying to get this whole new thing going. Yes, it's all broken and things don't work properly, but you've got to do marketing at the same time. You've got to start evangelizing this. So when you are ready, the money is ready. Otherwise, there's no point getting ready here and then the money's not ready. So anyone who built a startup knows that they have to deal with a broken infrastructure and an imperfect company, and at the same time go around selling that to VCs. This is a bit like that. So he's trying to do that. So I give him credit for what's happening over here. And I'm not too worried about, the lack of this execution. It's been a year. It's a big ship to turn around. It's a big boat to fix. He has to evangelize on the other side, and I think that's what's happening.
You talked about, that you're impressed at certain levels, but you think at what cost, right? What is the cost for us back at home? And you talked about Facebook and the conspiracy theory of internet.org, which might actually...
There's no conspiracy theory, right? The fact is that explicitly TRAI and the government panel both banned or recommended that no zero rating services be allowed, specifically any of the kind that internet.org represents.
Right.
Even yet, for the last 2 months, we've been seeing the commercials all over the place. We've been seeing the press ads all over the place. There's a bunch of guys who went out there, were flown business class all over there to hear talk. And, he puts out this entire thing. The same code is used for internet.org as well as the entire, Facebook change your face DP kind of a thing. So you understand very clearly what Zuckerberg wants is really internet.org to come into India. And certainly, I mean, I'm really one who says that you want to bring Facebook into India, you want to bring more techies into India, more product into India, yes. But I'm not really a fan of internet.org or its new name, Free Basics. And I really think the government in India should stand firm and not let that in.
Fair enough, Mahesh. But I mean, but to assume, right, or presume that Modi's visit to Facebook and its headquarters and his meeting with Zuckerberg is actually an endorsement of internet.org in India.
You're presuming that. I didn't presume that, right? My point is, I mean, everything that Zuckerberg has said is very clearly about, including the posts he himself made on his page, were very clearly about working to get Free Basics, i.e. the old internet.org back into India. He was very, very clear about that, right? And, even getting everybody in Facebook to dress properly, which they've never done before, and all that stuff. There's no other reason to impress the leader of the world's greatest democracy, right? There's nothing else Facebook has asked of India, except this one thing.
So fair enough. So how do you think Narendra Modi should have tackled that?
No, there's no should have. There is should, right? So what he did was whatever, I mean, he went there and he was invited, that's fine, he did well. But I think what's really important is we have to stand firm on our principles of our self-governance. We need to have an open internet for all. We need to have a neutral internet for all. We need to have a clear open playing field. We cannot have, the internet balkanized into little places where, Facebook owns one part of it and Google owns one part of it and whoever else owns one part of it and people can't talk to each other. Our children need absolutely the open part of the internet. To put it another way, if Zuckerberg was a child in India and used internet.org, he couldn't ever have set up Facebook himself.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Fair enough, fair enough. Rajesh, if I could pull you in, if I just move away from internet.org for a minute and talk about, this whole, great salesman that Modi has been in the Silicon Valley, do you think investors and your community or your counterparts there are actually convinced?
No, absolutely. I think he's a brilliant strategist. But you think of it like he's a CEO and a strategist. I think on ground he needs a CEO to execute. So a great company or a great startup or a great nation cannot be built with this deficit between strategy and execution. And I think that's the point I was trying to make. It's a fast moving world. In certain other ways I'm really disappointed. I think we need some leapfrog strategies here, not incremental steps forward. For example, how do we think about leapfrogging from 3G to 5G? How do we think about leapfrogging from credit card to mobile wallets? So that's where government has a role to play through bold policy making. And I think they should come back, get on the drawing board and get in execution mode.
You know, just taking up from Rajesh's point, on the one hand, Modi says all the right things. We want a digital India. We want to be able to get hundreds of millions of Indians on digital platforms using their mobile phones for education, for transactions, for any kind of daily life activity. Yet, on the other hand, his ministers out here sit back and say, well, no foreign investments in e-tail because FDI and retail is not allowed, and hence FDI and e-tail won't be allowed. And hence, we've got to do this subterfuge where Indian e-com firms have to go and, reincorporate themselves in Singapore or elsewhere, or they have to come and do this back office, front office thing, which is, WS and Flipkart and so on and so forth. And there's no reason for this subterfuge. I mean, why don't you come out and say, so you can't have policy on the one hand saying, bring me investment in e-commerce, and on the other hand saying, no investment in e-commerce at the same time. So there is this dichotomy between, so essentially here's what Modi is doing. He's trying to keep our people happy and the overseas audience happy by saying, yes, we want money. At the same time, he's trying to keep the traditional BJP loyalists, the shopkeepers and the Kirana Dukan guys happy by saying no FDI in e-commerce. At some point, I mean, you can only play this crazy balancing game for that long. You have to give, right? So this is just one example where we have to break through our regulations.
Fair enough, fair enough. Let me come to you. Like he said, and taking off from there, even when, the whole digital India, plan was unleashed, a lot of critics and, digital experts talked about the fact that there was just no clarity in terms of what's the roadmap, what's the blueprint, how are things going to go. And there seemed to be, and I think still exists, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of ambiguity on the whole execution plan. So there seems to be a knowing-doing gap at some level. So having said that, at a stage where internally the country is not clear, do you think this was the right time to go outside and, paint a picture that is larger than
I think that's a good point.
Right?
The question is what kind of a strategy should you follow? And, I don't think anybody expected that he would be such a brilliant foreign minister, so to speak. The way he has kind of gone out, evangelized India, nobody expected him to do that because he did not have prior experience. Everybody thought that, with his administrative expertise of, being the chief minister of Gujarat for three consecutive terms, he would be a great administrator. But I think we still have to see evidence of that. I'll give a couple of examples. So Digital India is a good example. The vision is great. I think the umbrella term of Digital India, I think everybody is really bought into that. And even terms like, smart cities, etc. I can see that, the industry is very excited. But in terms of execution, in terms of really detailing out how to, lay it out, what is the roadmap ahead, people are still very confused. And that is not a good thing. If I were to, have some say in things, I would say that focus on India first, because at this point in time and for the next few years, India is the economy that is growing. All the Microsofts and the Googles will come to India if, we put our own house in order.
I take a little bit of an issue with what Rehan said. Yeah, he rightly said that in many cases, a startup CEO is always out there selling and putting on a face out there to get money in, while he's at the same time, you're riding the bike while you're building it.
And
you're trying to fix the infrastructure, right? But the point really is, if you look at the world out there, and from a global investor's point of view, China is on a bit of a decline. Japan's not going to many places. Europe is flat. Nobody's looking at South America and Africa. The US is one place, but it is kind of meteoric. You find the right fund you're in. The one place which is broadly acknowledged to be, secularly growing is India. Right? Hence, the money has started coming in and so on and so forth. But what are the roadblocks? Even if I look at my business, the venture capital and private equity business, in the last 10 years, $80 billion have come in, but $35 billion have gone out. There's still $45 billion stuck here in unexitable or not yet exited businesses, right? So somebody out there is saying, well, is it really different? Every time India puts up a great white hope and we're dashed somewhere, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So somewhere, to make this a reality, you know, maybe we should be able to break through all of this and say, look, let's change these regulations. He's got the mandate. He's got the people's mandate to do that. And exactly to Venki's point, I mean, he's been known as a brilliant administrator and a brilliant executor. Where's that gone? Nobody's dumb in Silicon Valley. Nobody's dumb in India. People can see through hollow promises. And unless you can see, they're going to call us and say, guys, are you really seeing a change in the ground? And they're going to hear this, right? And they're going to sit back and say, well, that was just a marketing exercise. So this news travels fast. The real solution to this is to break through all the barriers in the administrative systems and the services that are out here. Make it easier. With all of this, we are still ranked 150th in the world in terms of a place to do business.
Ease of doing business,
right?
yeah.
And we're all trying to do business, you know, all of us. Yeah. And it's difficult out here.
So I think, you know, this whole thing that they've announced of going up to number 50 in the ease of doing business, that is resonating in every state now in India. If you notice, every state in India now has their own ease of doing business focus. At least there's a quantitative number that we are focused on. And that's the hallmark of a good CEO. He creates a number and gets people focused on that. So they created this 50 number, and they came up with this whole thing of ranking the states also based on that. I mean, I think if you saw yesterday, Maharashtra announced, or was it today's paper, that the number of licenses to open a hotel are going to be cut down from 75 to 29. Right? So 29 still sounds like a lot, but it's a lot less than 75. And this, for the first time, I'm seeing these politicians speak a number, which is a quality-oriented number. Now, I think it'll take time for that to execute. But I think it's a far stretch to say, you know, it's not happening. I think he's fundraising. And let me tell you, as somebody who, you know, I run a fund, right? So we also go fundraising overseas. 2013, nobody wanted to talk to us, right? 2015, they all want to talk to us. I wasn't even getting meetings in 2013. You know, if I was getting meetings, nobody was asking me about my fund and my track record. People were just asking me about the macro in India. Hey, what is happening in India? Is everything okay? You know, I mean, that whole corruption thing and everything that was going on earlier, at least that cloud seems to have lifted to some extent, right? People are not talking about a corrupt government anymore. Now we are moving on to other issues. I think we've moved up the Maslow's pyramid in a way, actualization pyramid, right? Where corruption was right at the bottom. Now you're saying, okay, what about execution? Let's get out of that. And I think they're talking about it. So he's going and selling the story at, let me tell you, as somebody, no great product got sold on its own without selling it. It's very rare, right? So I think he's doing that, and they're executing on this side, and I think investors are seeing it. At least I'm seeing it personally.
Let me just go back to, let's talk about startups, right? So I believe in the interim budget, there was about 10,000 crores. In the budget, there was about 10,000 crores allocated for startup funding.
Yeah.
And then in the interim, there's another 1,000 crores added. Now, one is not clear if that 1,000 is part of that 10,000, but that apart, right? Yeah. Nitty-gritties apart. Yeah. Have you seen, all of you, have you seen any movement in terms of deployment of that fund?
Yes, it's deployed.
Okay.
It's called the India Aspiration Fund. It's been deployed, and we ourselves are a recipient of it.
Okay.
So I can vouch for it one-on-one. Modi took over in July. Then they had that interim budget. Then they had that proper budget in March, in which, so, you know, let's forget that interim budget, right? That was like a weird budget. Right, so they had this proper budget in March. In that, they announced 2,000 crores. It's actioned.
Fair. You're also in agreement with that?
So actually, the thing is that, you know, so for the longest time, we didn't know where the 10,000, 11,000 crores went. We had no idea. Yeah. And I'm glad Rehan got some of it because, you know, for a whole lot of people, I wasn't in fundraising mode at that point in time. We had no idea, and nobody we talked to in government knew either. Which is the strange thing about, you know, you go to government, they had no idea where it was. Till suddenly somebody said, oh yeah, we promised something. Let's figure out a way to do it. Again, you know, cup, lip, gap. There is still something out there.
I've interacted with this government and with the previous government.
Sure.
And when it came to IT, in the previous government, it was almost impossible to have an intelligent conversation with anybody in the Congress.
Okay.
And if I look at this government, I think they have a superb set of people who are very IT savvy. I think that's a significant qualitative improvement in the quality of conversations we have about technology.
Okay.
So that's, I think, a great plus. At the same time, you know, again, coming back to the execution issue, you know, you have the encryption policy, which was, you know, issued with so many flaws, but I think at least to the IT minister's credit, he took it back immediately. Sure. Then you had the policy on net neutrality, which was issued, and then, you know, so many comments came in. So I think clearly there's a massive execution gap, and that really needs to be plugged soon.
So Rajesh, if I could pull you in, as you heard, you know, there seems to be, you know, a diverse set of opinions here. Rehan, of course, very, you know, optimistic and impressed actually by, you know, the baby steps the government has taken in its 1 year of administration. He actually thinks there has been significant progress. Others, of course, Mahesh and Venkatesh believe, you know, there's, you know, knowing doing gap, and there's an execution problem that we have at hand. What's really your view?
You see, there are 2 points. I think driving any change of significance in India is a task. It's a complex country. I think Prime Minister referred to this analogy that if you have to change the course of a scooter, it's 1 second task. When you're moving a train with 40 bogies, it takes time. And I think, I hope that he has taken that time of a year, and now he is prepared with his team to turn the bogie around. And I agree with Venkatesh when he says that there is a team of exceptional caliber in place, at least in IT, that understands the task at hand. But I think it's the time, next 1 year is the time to execute.
Sonali, let's listen, I think the primary focus is creating 10 million jobs a year. And I think that is what the PM has recognized, because without that, you're going to have, a collapse of the nation. And I really like this whole thing that he did of make in India. It's not made in India, but make in India, it's humbler. Okay. It's like saying, okay, come and even assemble in India, right? Make in India, create jobs for me, right? I like that humble approach. It's very pragmatic. It's on the ground. Innovation can come later once we again move up the pyramid.
Okay.
Let's get our basics in place first. Let's start creating some jobs. Let's get the capital flowing. Yes, it may not be coming in the sexiest form of, people doing all these innovative startups, but things don't start in a sexy form. They become sexy after maturity.
So I want to take a small bit of issue with what Rehan said. While Make in India is fine, and I do believe India needs jobs, I'm not sure looking in technology and IT is a place you're going to find those jobs. Even in hardware, sure, Modi has asked Tim Cook to make iPhones in India, and Foxconn has come to Maharashtra. Sure. But even if Foxconn starts making iPhones in India, how many jobs is that, right? It's either very lowly paid jobs, it's a bunch of jobs because a lot of it is done by robots. Or even hardware. I mean, cars are made by robots largely. So I don't know if these are really the sectors where you're going to get jobs. You'd probably be able to create jobs in chemicals, fertilizers, steel and other places. I really don't know too much. So I'm not sure out there. The second argument that we made traditionally is that the software sector has created a lot of jobs. Now here's the issue. If I take a TCS and if I take a Microsoft or a Google has 50,000 people, 66 billion in revenue, a TCS 300,000 people, 5 times the size and 1/5 in revenue, right? So essentially the productivity difference between a product company and a services company is 25:1 or 20:1 in terms of a wealth creation basis, right? What do we want? Do we just want jobs, or do we want to get the real rich high-end jobs? How long will we in the sasti mein karenge sector? Sure, there'll be manufacturing, but again, the nature of what a Foxconn...
They do work a couple of years.
Even if you take... The Foxconn isn't doing, from what I know, much intellectual property. Everything gets designed in California, just manufactured out here. In fact, the biggest issues with Foxconn were slave labor, where people had to stay for 28 days of the month in the factory and work 16 hours a day for very little money, right? I don't think, I'm waiting to see how Indian trade unions take to that particular mindset for getting stuff to work here. That's not the right kind of jobs I think we need.
I think, we've been so, despite the government all these years, I think now that the government is doing something, you're looking at it very suspiciously.
It's only going to get better.
Oh my God, what are they doing?
Sure.
That's all right. I'm happy for them to come. It's just that I've been doing this now for 16 years out here, and I haven't really seen so much change as yet on the ground. So people announce their scoreboards, announce their score tags, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, that income tax guy, that service tax guy still wants something under the table, right? Yeah. That hasn't yet changed.
If I've got you guys right, I think everybody is very happy with the big grand pitch he's made in the valley. But the point is now come back home and get our books in order. Yeah. And let's start running, right?
मतलब बेच के तो आ गया सपना पर यहाँ कुछ मतलब देश को मत बेचो कुछ यहाँ करा तो दो.
On that note, just give me your score for score in terms of a report card on 10 for Narendra Modi's Silicon visit.
Overall, I'd say maybe 6 or 7.
That's pretty high, Mahesh, for you.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like I said, it's really good. It's not a no story; it's a yes but story.
Rajesh, if you could give me, your score for Narendra Modi's Silicon Valley visit.
I think 7.5. Absolutely brilliant job in executing the visit and getting the prime time on television and mesmerizing the world. Now it's all about execution.
Rehan?
No, I think if I could break it up, I think 9 on 10 in terms of vision.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So you're clearly thinking about where to get. in terms of team and having that CEO, I think it's coming together, and that's what maybe drags down the overall number down to something like Mahesh's 6-7.
I think in cricketing terms, I think he really hit a sixer.
Okay.
But I think the rest of the team should start, moving up from taking singles to, hitting a few fours and sixers.
Thank you so much for taking time out. Thank you so much, Rajesh, for joining us from Delhi, and all you three gentlemen who are taking time out and joining us right here on Brand Equity. On that note, we're completely out of time. We hope you enjoyed the show. Do take the time and drop us a line at brandequity@etnow.tv, or alternatively, log on to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/brandequity, and give us your comments on what you thought of the Prime Minister's visit to the Silicon Valley. You could do the same on Twitter @brandequitylive. I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Thanks for watching.